Hey everybody, and in this video I just want to quickly collect all of my thoughts and impressions about Planet Zoo, specifically the ones that I got during Gamescom while I was doing live streams, and also recorded the footage that you're looking at right now, which I was not allowed to release until the day before yesterday. I'm a little bit late with this one, but anyway, let's just get it on. I want to make this video as a kind of summary of all of my thoughts to try and do something unique with this compared to some of the other streamers who have gotten the same looks into the game that I have gotten. So I'll just go through all of my thoughts and, well, my main ideas, and we'll see what comes out of it. It's a bit of a recap of my streams as well. I'm not a very good streamer and these videos take a while to go through, so I figured it would be good to have a more condensed presentation of my thoughts in this video. I also should note that I'm probably a bit biased. There are no payments or whatsoever going from Frontier my way, but at the end of the day they're treating all of us, all of the people they're inviting to stream or do whatever with their games, even come up to the community event in Cologne. They're just treating everybody way too nicely, so as much as I want to try to be objective, I'm probably biased in a few ways. Still, those who know me know that I've always been really critical of Planet Coaster, see for instance the Schematics podcasts, or the whole incident that got me in contact with the devs. I was reminded by Dale, who used to be community manager at Frontier, that the only reason that I actually managed to get into contact with the developers is because I called the game absolute shit on the Planet Coaster subreddit Discord server, so I don't know, maybe something will come of critiquing Planet Zoo, but I'm just gonna try and present my thoughts as honestly as possible here. Also, my perspective is someone who doesn't have expertise in animals per se. I'm just interested mostly in scenery, theming, architecture, foliage, those kinds of things. That's where I'd say I can come in with actual unique things to say and with some decent expertise. And when it comes to animals, I'm just about the average person, so I'm not going to comment too much on that because I don't think I'm a voice of authority per se on that matter. Anyway, I wasn't too much into theme parks before Roller Coaster Tycoon 3, and I didn't even dare to ride roller coasters until Planet Coaster, so maybe I'll get much more into zoos at some point, but at this point it's not something that I want to speak about too in-depth before I make any mistakes or anything like that. Anyway, that's all the things that I wanted to say gone. Now, moving on to my actual thoughts about the game. There's one thing that I really want to put a lot of focus on. The one aspect of the game that honestly surprised me the most, that I found most promising and quite unique. And yeah, it's really probably the thing that I'm most hyped about. It's just how physical all of the scenery objects are. I think when it comes to simulation games like this, it's always been a struggle to manage creativity on one hand and gameplay or strategy on the other, because these kind of games come with a framework of constrained creative play where you have to juggle limits of management with the creative freedom of artistic expression. And it's always just a major challenge. And in Planet Coaster, for instance, I think scenery has always been kind of an invisible decoration. It has a limited use as scenery value, but it doesn't really interact much with anything else in the game. And overall, it's just very much a game that most people play for the sake of scenery. And then on the other hand, you've got games like the original Roller Coaster Tycoon, which most people play really focused on the management side of things. And the thing is, in a lot of games, I think it's a bit of a trade-off between scenery versus management focus, and making stuff look good versus making stuff work well have always been kind of separate things. But I think in Planet Zoo so far, what I really like is just how incorporated scenery is in the gameplay and management aspects of the game, because it is so physical. So for one, scenery is interacted with, so you'll have animals that climb on climbable props, like all the monkeys will use climbing bars that you can build piece by piece, and they'll actually interact with it, and climb in different ways, like the mandrills over here in this park of the preview build that I managed to play here, which is absolutely amazing. And it's not even just the climbable props. I think this is something to also be clarified. Animals will climb on just about anything if it's climbable reasonably, I think. I don't see any reason not to assume so, because I've seen them climb on pretty much any object that you throw at them. It's just that the specific objects which are in the climbable objects section are used to fulfill the climbing needs of the animals. But still, monkeys will climb in trees, all the animals will climb onto rocks, maybe even sleep there or do whatever. They'll interact with different kinds of scenery pieces in a different way, which is really cool. And what's also kind of interesting is that on my last live stream in Gamescom, I was building a tiger temple, and I had some logs leading into the temple, and then inside the temple was all of the bedding. And I even noticed that a staff member walked those logs into this temple to the bedding. So even the staff members can use scenery to walk to certain places. The same goes for the lay designer. She built an island for her lemurs and had some wooden bridges to get on the island. And these bridges weren't the kind of scenery object where you look at it and you're like, right, the staff can clearly walk on that, of course. But at the end of the day, one staff member eventually crossed those bridges to clean poop off the island. So that was really cool as well. I only kind of regret not testing scenery on guest paths, because I'm not sure to what extent the same goes for guest paths, because guests, wayfinding is probably a bit different from staff and animals, but that's something to see later. Anyway, the second thing that I thought was really interesting about scenery is that it affects animal needs, which I have to admit is of course a bit of a no-brainer for a zoo game, of course, but I think it's really well executed here. You don't just need the right food and enrichment, but also trees, terrain, and all kinds of other scenery elements that you might add, which I think is really cool, especially when it comes to foliage. And I think here too, it works really well with the scenery UI from Planet Coaster. Planet Coaster has always had this system where you can filter out certain objects based on which content pack they're from, or which kind of scenery they are, or even based on custom tags. And this is a system that's never really worked that well in Planet Coaster. I think there are some questionable choices as to where certain scenery pieces belong. The custom tags are actually really great, but also this whole filtering has never been an absolute must-have in Planet Coaster, I think. But I think in Planet Zoo, it's become much more important because it's a real gameplay element, and it helps you figure out, you know, I'm building this animal, this is what part of the world they're from, this is the kind of biome that they need, and then based on that you can filter out all of the scenery elements and get just the right foliage into their habitat, which is just a really nice touch. And finally, I just really like the way that weather interacts with scenery as well. I really didn't expect weather to look this good. I remember that there were many conversations around Planet Coaster. People always wanted to have weather in Planet Coaster, and time again, the devs, well, they had to say that it was just not doable because there are so many things to keep in mind when everything is piece by piece built and you want to have dynamic weather. It's very complicated. And the fact that there is weather like this in Planet Zoo, the fact that rain splashes on flat surfaces, falls off the sides of roofs, the fact that snow covers basically everything and then leaves everything that's covered dry, it's absolutely amazing. And on Rudy Renkamel's stream, he built a giant aviary out of stone pillars, brick pillars on the sides of the aviary. And these brick pillars kind of curved as they went up. So they started vertical at the bottom and then curved to more diagonal slope at the top. And the cool thing is that there was noticeably more snow on these things at the top on the diagonal sections. And then on the vertical parts all the way at the bottom, the snow only settled in the mortar between the bricks, which is absolutely amazing. I wasn't even expecting snow to settle on the ground, let alone that it settles, you know, on the sides of vertical textures. So you know, and I think this is something that people are definitely going to take for granted once the game has been out for a while. But the fact that scenery interacts with, or the fact that weather interacts with scenery in this way is absolutely crucial. And I also just like the way that animals interact with this. Again, the fact that they will flee from rain, cold or heat, depending on where they're from and what the weather is like, and then use piece by piece built structures as shelter is really cool. So yeah, what I'd say in the end is that the one thing that I really like about the game is that, you know, at least so far it seems like making a park run well can be a combination of making it well managed and making it look good. And it's not like these are two different goals that you have to look after this at different times, but it's really, you know, a single objective in a sense. And scenery and management are always things that I've considered sort of a balance, two things on both sides of a scale. But this game might just prove that it can be a combination as well, to an extent that I haven't seen much in sandbox games so far. So that's something that I find really interesting and positive about my impressions so far. Now there are some other things that are noteworthy. I'm first gonna list some smaller things that I found notable, and then I'll come to the footage that you're looking at right now, which I should probably do at some point as well. So first of all, the foliage is absolutely beautiful. I'm really happy about that. A lack of foliage was always one of my main gripes with Planet Coaster, and they've more than compensated for it in this game, which I think makes sense as well, since this is a zoo game, and having fauna, you know, having the right flora is also really important. And there seems to be a much wider variety of trees and bushes from different biomes. All of them look very crisp and realistic compared to Planet Coaster's foliage. I did notice that there are certain trees and bushes that are coming back from Planet Coaster, but all of them have gotten new models, new textures, and just look a bit better. I didn't notice a single foliage piece that was exactly the same. Maybe I just looked over it because I didn't play the game that much, but my impression anyway is really good. The tall grass is really beautiful as well. So altogether, I think that's a positive. I've seen some criticism about a lack of variation. Very often you'll only have 2 or 3 trees of a certain type for variation, so it is true. If you don't watch out with that, you'll make it very obvious that every tree is just a copy. But then again, if you keep rotating them, mixing it up a little bit, I think it'll be very doable to just make believable forests and biomes and habitats. It's also something to keep in mind that all of these trees are interacted with by animals and respond to weather, so I can kind of see why the amount of trees is limited. And I also want to note the building pieces. I think overall the textures are a bit more realistic than in Planet Coaster, and different sets seem to fit well together. And altogether, I think the whole style of the game that they seem to go for with the foliage and the new building pieces is a bit less cartoony than Planet Coaster, which in my eyes is a positive as well. The weather effects are amazing. Obviously, not too much I can really say about that. The scenery with physics that animals can actually play with is really cool. The fact that you can throw toys for enrichment in habitats and they will really roll off hills and animals will pick them up is really cool. And I know this is also kind of a basic thing and something you would expect from a zoo game, but the fact that, you know, the physics was completely absent from scenery in Planet Coaster just kind of makes me very excited about this. Even the poop rolls off the hills and it looks wet in the rain, which is a beautiful detail. One thing that's a bit of a bummer is that you can no longer terraform around bodies of water like you could in Planet Coaster. But I also have to say that this is probably a trade-off for the ability to put water inside the habitat walls, right? The volumetric water. Because in Planet Coaster, water wasn't volumetric. You could just build a small pond and then edit the edges as you wanted with the terraforming tool. But in Planet Zoo, as soon as the water is in somewhere, you can't edit the terraforming around it anymore. So if if you really want to change the shape of that lake or pond, you have to take the water out, I think, and then move stuff around and put it back in, which is a bit of a bummer. But then again, I think it's a net gain if we're able to put water inside habitat walls and have glass walls underneath water in habitats, or build custom fountains even, or things like that. Now finally, I wanted to discuss some of the things which I've shown in this video, and a lot of other YouTubers have already focused on this, so I wanted to just make it a small part of this video. But we've got a bunch of new animals. The ones that are actually in habitats are the Indian rhinos, the mandrills, which I'm adding some climbing elements for here, the Himalayan bears, Baird's tapirs, gharials, which is the crocodiles with a super lengthy snout, which I'm fixing the water supply for here, and the pronghorn antelopes, which you can see shares its habitat with springboks. That's something that somebody on the Planet Zoo Discord was asking a question about, and yeah, I think it wasn't too much shown off in the Planet Coaster livestream, but yeah, these guys share their habitat, which is pretty neat. And also, what's really cool is the Indian subcontinent theme, which I think looks great. I think it's based on Indo-Islamic or Indo-Sarenic architecture. It's kind of difficult to tell, but these are very eclectic and flexible architectural styles. So I'm really happy about that, because I think it could probably be used for Middle Eastern or North African themed habitats and areas as well. There is just so much detail in that, and it's an overall architectural style which I thought was kind of underrepresented in Planet Coaster, and especially with this being a game where you want to be able to represent pretty much any part of the world, I think it's really cool to see this kind of architecture in here. And finally, I think it's notable that there are a lot of recolorable wall pieces in this map. During the Gamescom live streams, I saw a lot of people asking about recolorability of pieces, because many of the pieces in the demo build and the live stream build during Gamescom had very few recolorable options. But yeah, I think that's just something related to the British and generic theme that was in that build of the game, because the building sets in this map show a lot of recolorable building pieces. And I have to say, recolorability is a bit of a trade-off as well. Recolorable items always have, slightly less nuances, slightly less details on the textures than non-recolorable items. So I think for brick walls, things like that, it's quite alright to have no recolorable options. Although, I suppose the best situation would be to have a non-recolorable wall and then another recolorable kind of similar piece with just a different texture that recolors better. The only thing that I'm a bit concerned about here is I do hope that those brown pieces are recolorable as well. But aside from that, the whole set looks entirely recolorable, so that's good. Anyway, those were all my thoughts about Planet Zoo based on Gamescom. I know there's a lot of things that I didn't really touch upon, like the electricity or water management, or certain elements of managing animals and stuff, but these are really just general things that I thought have been much more talked about in other live streams, other YouTube content, and by Frontier themselves. This video is just some of the things that stuck out most to me. But yeah, I do wonder if you guys have anything that you really want me to know about or want to have my opinion about, then feel free to ask or tell me about anything in the comment section. And I'd like to thank you guys for watching, and hopefully I'll see you in some Planet Zoo video in the future. Not quite sure when that's going to be, but it's definitely going to happen at some point, and I'll be playing the beta as well. Anyway, bye guys.